The movie begins with the family of oceanographer Tom, his wife Julia, and their two children Cassie and Ben go on a trip on a yacht in the Caribbean Sea. While the father and son are busy with fishing and Cassie is occupied with her gadget, Julia goes for a swim. Suddenly, something alarms her. She looks around, but the sea is still calm. However, she begins to feel anxiety, as if something big and dangerous is circling around. At this time, the devices on the yacht begin to act strangely, but Tom, being busy fishing, does not pay attention to them. Meanwhile, the woman feels worse and worse, and eventually, she begins to drown. She screams, but the family does not hear her. The water seems to start moving and carries Julia further and further from the yacht. When the situation becomes critical, Tom finally hears her voice. He rushes to the steering wheel, and the yacht sails towards the departing woman. Tom jumps into the water, and with the help of the children, drags her on board and brings her to her senses. The husband is angry. After all, he always told them, when you go for a swim, warn the others that you are going into the water. The wife apologizes, and the incident is forgotten. Moreover, the family has a reason to rejoice. Their son Ben turns 13 today. Tom lights candles on a cake, and everyone congratulates Ben, and he starts accepting the gifts. Cassie takes a group photo of the happy family. At this moment, the girl gets a video call from her boyfriend. He asks her about the voyage, when a sudden and intense thunderstorm begins in the background behind him. Cassie is worried, but the boyfriend assures her that he is safe. Right after that, the connection gets interrupted. The daughter informs her parents about the severe thunderstorm on land, and then everyone starts feeling some kind of jolts. They runs out onto the deck and see huge whales floating around the yacht. Tom explains that sometimes whales get off course due to a storm, but these animals begin to push the yacht and threaten its safety. The husband jumps into the water and soon returns on board injured. Trying to see what was going on, he cut himself on the screw. The wife stitches up the cut on her husband's shoulder, and he explains that apparently, due to a whale tail blow, the yacht's shafts are bent, and now they are unlikely to be able to sail away. Later, the girl tries to establish a connection, but there is no network, and the walkie-talkie also does not catch any signal. Tom begins to count the reserves. There will be enough water for 4 days, no more, but they are on a shipping route, so somebody will definitely find them. However, threatening sounds are heard outside, and when people get out on the deck, they see glowing objects falling from the sky. They land closer and closer, and Tom, at his own risk, starts the engine. He manages to steer the ship away from another meteorite, but the engine breaks down completely, and the next object falls so close to them that the people are able to see that these are artificial satellites of the Earth. A strong wind starts blowing outside, and the devices go crazy. A terrified family hides inside the yacht, which is tossed by the waves. People are putting on life jackets and preparing for the worst when a strange ringing sound is heard, which makes people nauseous and causes nosebleeds. Tom tries to call for help with a flare, but all in vain. The family barely survives the night, and in the morning, they come to their senses, glad that everyone is alive. But there is a huge hole in the side of the yacht, and it is unclear why they are still afloat. People go outside and freeze in amazement. There is no water around anymore, and their boat is standing on a stone hill in the middle of a rocky desert that the ocean has turned into. A little later, Tom tries to encourage the family because it is impossible that absolutely all other people died. The man takes measurements and realizes that the compass is lying. The north is not where it should be. This means that the Earth's poles have shifted. This has already happened once, but a very long time ago. It turns out that the sea went to where the land was, and most likely, humanity died. Cassie cannot bear such a discovery and runs away to the cabin and asks to be left alone. Julia goes to count the remaining products, and Ben launches a bunch of colored balloons into the sky in the hope that the survivors will come to their aid. Tom turns on his walkie-talkie, sending out a signal for help, and suddenly he hears a response. This is Now, the captain of a small bathyscaphe. He and his colleague were at the depth when the disaster occurred, and thanks to this, they were able to survive. However, now no system is working, and it is foolish to hope to get help. According to his calculations, the sea will return back in a week, and it will be very tough. So the man advises to find an elevation and try to stay there. Julia tells the children to pack their things. Tom asks the captain directly if he can save their children. He explains that the bathyscaphe is very small. By an accident, the captain's colleague died, and he can only take one person. But after Tom's persuasions, he agrees to take the children and shares his coordinates. Tom paves the way on a nautical chart and promises to get to the spot in a couple of days. The next morning, the family is almost ready for the journey. Tom goes out onto the deck and suddenly sees a man with a dog approaching. He goes to greet him affably when he notices that the man is injured. Tom treats the traveler to water. The man drinks it and suddenly hits Tom in the face. Julia sees that. She rushes to her husband while the traveler plunges a homemade spear into Tom's chest. The dog isn't letting Julia come closer, but she freezes in horror anyway. Realizing that her husband can no longer be helped, she runs to the yacht. The man starts chasing her and wounds the woman in the arm. Nevertheless, Julia climbs onto the deck. The children hear her screams and come towards her. Together, they barricade the doors to the cabin. Julia then hides Cassie and Ben in a locker, giving her daughter a flare gun and telling her to shoot only as a last resort. At this time, the killer tries to break down the doors, which he eventually succeeds in. At this time, the woman hides in the toilet and seals her wound. Once inside, the foreigner first goes to the galley and grabs food. It is clear that he is very hungry. Holding a tin can in his hands, the man begins to search the yacht while the woman is getting armed with a kitchen knife. He enters the cabin, but Julia jumps overboard, hiding under the yacht. The killer looks out through the hole, but he does not see her. However, the dog rushes at the woman, and she has to kill it. The man hears the whining, goes outside and finds the dog's corpse. At this time, Julia climbs onto the yacht through the porthole of the other side and falls straight into his hands. He beats her, knocks her down on the couch, and grabs her by the throat, intending to strangle her. The daughter sees all this and realizes that this is the last resort. She opens the lid of the locker and shoots the man. He is thrown aside, but the yacht catches fire from the flare. Julia orders the children to escape while she sneaks into the galley. It turns out that the killer is only wounded, and he is trying to attack again. The mother of the teens kicks him away, grabs the prepared bags, and jumps outside, where Ben finds his father's body. Cassie runs there too and cries over the corpse. Julia kisses her dead husband, but sees that the murderer jumped out of the burning yacht, and she takes the children away. The yacht explodes behind them. The family runs through the desert and soon takes refuge in a stone canyon, where a stream gurgles, but the water in it is salty and cannot be drunk. Cassie shares a small supply of water with her brother, but he refuses to drink. The boy feels guilty because, most likely, the killer came after seeing his balloons. Cassie also expresses this thought, but the mother orders her daughter to shut up and justifies her son because he didn't mean anything bad. She asks the children to get ready because there is a long way ahead, and then she sees the man again. He stubbornly follows in their footsteps. People leave, and in the evening, Ben finds a carcass of a hammerhead fish and tries to butcher it, but Julia sees the stalker and tells the children to run. A little later, they find a whole field of once flooded toxic waste in barrels, but Julia walks directly through it together with the children, despite the threat of infection, because the killer is not far behind. The family walks along the bottom of the former ocean, wading through deposits of plastic and other debris left by people. Soon, Julia notices that Ben is completely dehydrated and gives him the last drops of water. The daughter becomes hysterical because they will not be able to survive anyway, but the mother orders them to keep walking. A little later, they find a fuselage of an airplane that has long fallen into the sea and climb inside it to rest. Julia looks at the last group photo of their family and tells a story about their father and her meeting for the first time. It took place in hospital where she worked, and Tom ended up there with decompression after an unsuccessful dive. The children cry, remembering their father, and bid him farewell. At night, Cassie is awakened by a sound, and having got out, she sits down by the plane. The killer walks towards her out of the darkness, not knowing that the girl is playing the role of bait. He intends to grab her, and Julia rushes at him and kills the man with a knife. When the sun rises, the family gets ready to continue their journey and suddenly sees that the killer's body has been gnawed, and this means that there is something in the desert more terrifying than this man. They're leaving. Julia checks the path on the map as Ben pulls ahead. The mother screams at him, trying to stop him, but the boy runs to assault salty puddle and manages to drink a few sips. She pulls him away, but the boy gets sick. Soon the group finds plastic chairs and, having made a shelter from the sun out of them, they rest. Suddenly, Julia hears strange noises. She goes outside and sees something that makes her wake up the children. Realizing the new danger, they rush to run. Soon, people see a large ship ahead with broken containers lying around it, and several people are wandering around. Julia yells to them, but when they see thousands of huge crabs, they run into the container and close the doors behind them, ignoring the request for help. Then the three main characters climb onto the container, while one crab manages to injure Julia's leg. Nevertheless, the family, sitting on the roof, watches from above as the crabs penetrate through the crack in the door of the container, and despite the fact that people try to shoot them, the crabs kill everyone inside. The woman wraps her leg with a scarf and passes out. In the morning, she wakes up alone from a strong wind and starts calling the children in horror, but it turns out that the crabs went further away, and the kids climb down to find food and weapons. Julia cauterizes her wound while Ben checks the container. After searching the container, they find some water and food, and Julia finds a walkie-talkie in the pocket of one of the dead and calls Captain Now. He responds and says that he was also attacked by arthropods from the depths. By all indications, the sea will return very soon, which is why the creatures have crawled out. Julia asks to save her children, but does not know where to go because she has lost the map. Then the man fires a flare gun. Ben notices from which direction the flare flew, and the family rushes in that direction. Soon they see the Yellow Submarine in the distance, but it is very difficult to get to it because of the relief of the former sea bottom. Cassie doesn't like her mother's words about saving the children, but Julia doesn't want to answer her questions and drives the family further. They have to make their way through a canyon infected with toxic waste, and in one spot they get caught in rockfall, and Julia ends up cut off from the children. She orders them to go further, and when Cassie refuses to do so, the mother asks her to save her brother. Cassie and Ben get out of the canyon and reach the bathyscaphe, but there is no one inside, and suddenly a wounded Now comes out from behind the submarine. He admits that he has no chance to survive and orders them to get inside, but Cassie returns for her mother, who was just shooting the crabs that appeared. She's almost out of ammo when Cassie climbs onto a stone barrier and reaches to the mother with her hand. They manage to reach the bathyscaphe and climb inside, while Now is killed by the claws of the incoming crabs. The family climbs inside the submarine when a sea wave appears over the hill. The water picks up the submarine and drags it over the rocks. Everything that has happened in recent days flashes in front of Julia's eyes. When she regains consciousness, she finds that the ship is standing still. Julia opens the hatch, and after climbing out, the family finds themselves in a ruined city, where they were brought by the wave